Hello and welcome to episode number 18 of 11FS Spotlight. In this weekly show, we shine a spotlight on the best and the brightest in the tech and financial services industry and try to understand what gets them going, growing, and what they think the future of the industry might look like. In today's show, just to let you know, is brought to you by MyTech, digital identity verification trusted the world over. Secure more high-value customers while reducing risk and costs with MyTech, global leader and enterprise partner in identity verification technology. In addition to that, and just before we get started, I wanted to tell you that we're hiring. So over here at 11FS, we're still working hard to build the next generation of financial services, and our team is growing quickly. So we're looking for a bunch of new 11s to come and join us. If you or somebody you know is up for a new challenge and a bit of fintech nerd like us, check out our roles in consulting across product engineering, design, delivery, strategy. You'll find all the details at 11fs.com/careers. So on today's Spotlight, I'm delighted to be joined by David Lais, who's the Chief Product Officer at Ecolytiq, sorry. How are you doing, David?
I'm very well, thank you very much.
And I practiced that before the show as well, and I still got it wrong. Can you believe it?
Don't worry.
We're going to be discussing the idea of sustainability as a service and what the new era of sustainable banking looks like. Where are you dialing in from, first of all?
I knew you will ask this. Actually,
I don't want to get everyone to hate you right now, but it's a decent opener.
I'm actually in Spain right now, so yes, enjoying a little bit of sun. I don't have the pleasure of snow right now, so I'm very sorry about this.
That's all right. No worries. We'll crack on through gritted teeth. It's all good. Listen, to everybody listening, a big part of the show obviously is your involvement. Any questions you've got, please leave them in the comments sidebar, and we'll be answering them live for you today. Let's just start, David, by just getting to know you, what you do, a little bit of your background, and what you were doing and what you were doing before.
Sure, thanks. Well, first of all, also thank you for having me on the show. By the way, we're also hiring, so if you're caught up in the Brexit situation and you want to move to Poland, just taking over the show right now.
Plug away, man, plug away.
Joke aside, no, actually we are hiring, so it's not a joke. But anyway, I'm David, being in the payment industry for the last 18 years, started in an acquiring space, moved later on into an issuing space. And since 2015, so almost 6 years now, also trying to tackle the space from a sustainability side.
Cool. And I guess it's quite a significant jump, I suppose, because it's not just a jump in terms of, I'm quite interested in that industry or this industry, but it's actually kind of a jump in following a mission and a value and quite ethics led. I guess, have you always had an interest in sustainability as a topic, or is there a reason specifically you decided to move into this world?
Yeah, actually, it's by accident.
Okay.
I never actually had a real interest in sustainability until I actually stumbled into this topic. So very short and funny story. In 2015, I took a little bit of a break of the working world and started on a world trip. And I ended up in Asia, and being a German, ended up at one of those or more of those beautiful beaches. And the first thing I saw was a lot of plastic and waste lying around. And being German in my heart, obviously I started to complain, why not cleaning up the beaches here? And that was the first time it actually struck me, because I saw all of those little plastic pieces lying around. That can't be somehow good for the environment, and why is this happening? And this was actually my first endeavor on the entire topic of sustainability, and I just tried to look into it, and this is where it struck me, and I decided, all right, let's do something about it.
Yeah, it's amazing how some of those life occurrences, even small nuanced ones, then turns into something so aligned, but then so different. Obviously taking sort of the view of a beach and the impact of it into the financial services industry is super cool. For those people listening right now who don't know a lot about Ecolytiq, do you want to just mention what you guys do, and then where you guys are, I suppose, on your path to live?
Yeah, sure. Actually, I can just follow up on the story, because the first thing that I wanted to figure out is basically, what is my individual impact? So I was trying to figure out, do I have, with my style, my way of living, my way of traveling, the things I bought, does that actually have somehow an impact and on the environment? And it turns out it has. all of the things we do has a direct effect on the environment. And so I was trying to figure out, okay, how can we basically help consumers to understand what is their role and what they can change in order, to reduce it. And one of the things that I was working on previously on that was a company that was in the payment space that was taking care about financial transaction enrichment. So we added a lot of additional information to a financial transaction, such as merchant information, location, opening hours, etc., and was more used on the fraud level or on customer loyalty side. So I had a lot of background information on what is possible on financial transactions and what you can use it for, and what's actually also available in terms of data in that ecosystem. And so I was trying to figure out if there's any way we can use financial transaction to actually figure out our individual impact on the environment. And it turns out, because usually if our bank account reflects our purchase decision and also our consumption behind it, and it turns out that works very, very well. So what we do, we actually divide into two companies. One is the Organization for Sustainable Consumption, which is a non-for-profit organization. And with that organization, we have built an open standard to really make available our underlying studies, the underlying methodologies, and information assumption that you need to do in order to actually calculate those impact. Cool. And the second part is Ecolytiq, and Ecolytiq really helps financial institutions and banks to access all of those informations, and adding this layer of, let's say, an easier layer of integrating into their financial products. And we do this normally through 3 layers. So it's really about building this level of transparency, building this engagement with the consumer, and then allowing to have certain action points to actually start doing something about it.
So I guess in a real worked life example, is it at the level that because transaction enrichment, transaction categorization, etc., is a big business now for a lot of different companies, open banking companies, and there's ones that serve it directly. From your perspective, is it is like the Nirvana state that you would take a transaction, put a set, I guess, of qualifying criteria over that transaction, and then be able to recount to the customer, like, is it carbon footprint? Is it impact to the environment? How does the measurement, I mean, without too much technical detail, but how does the measurement work in that respect?
Yeah. So usually we start with carbon, because carbon is the best studies out there. There's a lot of studies out there. It's very well reflected in studies, and also, it's the most commonly known kind of factor for environmental situations, and this is kind of where we start, because that helps consumers. They have seen it somewhere, and so on and so on. But obviously, there are more factors to it. So it can be, it can be water, it can be land usage, biodiversity. Even slavery can be a factor. There's tons of things that can be added, but that it becomes very complex, and it becomes there's not enough data usually available or openly available. So you have to be careful on how you calculate it. So we really, at the moment, we're really focusing on CO2 levels and use that as a communication level.
Cool. I guess I don't want everything known to man at the moment is being called something as a service. So I'm just going to join that proverbial bandwagon. Sustainability as a service, but sustainability services to banks. I guess what does the banking industry need to do, I suppose, or how important is the banking industry to solving, the current levels of CO2 and carbon? And then as a service, I suppose it's very difficult at the moment to say if you put in our solution or put in a solution like ours, it would lead to X amount of reduction of your customers' carbon footprint. But have you got any sort of missions and visions in terms of how far you could potentially move the needle, just focusing on the banking sector?
Yeah. I think the best answer to that is if you look at in the sector and what it can do about sustainability is pretty much right now. Maybe one step back is, sustainability ultimately means an investment in our infrastructures. right? So if you take even public transport, this is great, but usually at some point you might take a bus which runs on gasoline. So in order to be really carbon neutral, you would need to change this bus. And it's the same with taking an airplane. It's the same with your house, right? You maybe need to change certain things there. You need to change the way we're using energy from coal to renewables, et cetera, et cetera. So ultimately, what we're talking about is a lot of investments in our infrastructure. And this is, I think, what does banks do? Managing investments, right? And sustainability is a great topic because consumers are now getting aware of it. They want to do something. They want to change something. So first, you can start by guiding consumers on, where they are and what they can do better. And then going into a dialogue with consumer itself, saying, okay, how do we want to envision a future? What is important for you? You might have kids, you might don't have kids, but then you can say, instead of, which is also good, planting some trees in order to offset my behavior, I might just, invest some money into renewable energies or into upgrading the public transport because I'm using it daily, et cetera, et cetera. So everyone has his own agenda, but it's kind of this nice topic where both sides have an interest in and where you can basically engage and start moving funds into the right direction to upgrade our world to be something, more environmentally friendly.
We'll come on to the topic of funds in a minute. I am interested though, in terms of, let's say on a per transaction basis, let's say it wasn't necessarily going on a bus or transport, but it was more, I've just bought something from Amazon that's turned up. How far back in the supply chain, I suppose, can you go or should you go to be able to tell customers what the true carbon footprint of the product that they've bought is? Because I suppose there's awareness is definitely half the battle, and that's an amazing thing to overcome in itself. But then there's also like the true reading of, well, I've just bought this, whatever it is, a vase from X, but actually that was manufactured in Y and it was produced in Z, and so on and so forth. So how far, I suppose, how far back do you feel confident that you can go at the moment, and how do you feel that might change in the future as data points through supply chains become more and more transparent?
Yeah, very good question. So it always depends, right? So payment data are great, but they aren't perfect. And so if you look at what I bought at a certain store, most likely even the store doesn't know where it was manufactured, right? So we have, in order to be really 100% precise, we need a full transparent supply chain. And until we get there, I think we will need years. And the other difficulty is we also need to get there in an open and accessible way. So we need to kind of help companies to open up for the information, saying, this is my open supply chain, but maybe they don't want to do it because they will release some information about their suppliers, which they rather keep as a secret. So there's a lot of complexity until we actually get to this point that we can really nail it down to the gram exactly what will be our impact. But at the other hand, I don't think it's that necessary because there's this broad misconception that I sometimes say, I use public transport today, so I can use my car tomorrow. Is that a fair comparison? And that is something that a lot of consumers do because I have done something good today, but so I can, be a bit more lazy tomorrow. And it still helps, even though the numbers are not 100% perfect, to get this kind of reflection. What is actually the most impactful spendings that I do, and how can I change that? So on a transaction level, they might not be always 100% accurate because we don't have this supply chain transparency. But if you look at it on a category level or on a monthly level, they're pretty precise. And at the end, we're talking about some numbers after the comma. So it is, of course, there are some assumptions. But I think as long as you communicate transparent with consumers and saying, this isn't perfect. And there's a lot of way to actually become perfect. And also you can put a pressure on your suppliers to be more open about this, to actually get there. But until then, it gives you a very good idea of where you are and where you can actually go.
And do you one of the interesting thanks for that. That was super interesting. I mean, one of the things that I'm keen to know from you is what's when you've taken this to banks, to product teams in banks, and said, look, this is what we can do. What's the kind of reaction been? Because I'm We've done Alice 11FS. We've done some ESG studies before. Generally, the trend is that customers, especially millennials, are interested in the topic, especially around things like impact investments and where there's money, where is it kept, etc. But from a transaction perspective, I haven't seen that many at the moment. Certainly, top tier banks sort of incorporate that kind of carbon setting. Carbon impact on top of their transactions, probably because the functionality doesn't exist, until companies like yourselves are starting up. But what kind of reaction have you had from banks so far? And I suppose how difficult is the integration to make without, again, going into any technicalities, to put your solution in place?
Yeah, I think the reaction different and difference on the agenda. So if you have, so let's say if we go to a neobank that is doing anyway some or is claimed to be a green bank, it's a no-brainer, right? So it's like a half an hour discussion, and we are ready to sign a contract. If you go into a tier one bank, it depends on their agenda. So if sustainability is a major topic, you basically have an open door, and you can have a conversation, and it's pretty much the same questions you like how accurate is it? Can we actually use it? Is there a business case behind it, or is it just a marketing kind of situation, right? So you have all of those questions that are popping in, but we see a lot of interest, and also I think for the most of them, a very open discussion about those things. So they are interested. But also right at the beginning, we had some very interesting conversations where a lot of tier banks like, we don't see the point in it. So what sustainability is not on our agenda. It's just another cost that is involved. We don't get it. And I think it really depends on how far they are in their own efforts on this entire topic, sustainability.
I mean, do you, in my mind, I almost think that it should be, maybe I'm a bit of a zealot like this, but I almost think it should be mandatory. Like in the same way that, if you've got like your Apple Watch now, or, Strava, if you go for runs and stuff, and it calculates the calories that you've run. And now, because the data has improved to such a degree, it literally counts the calories by the calorie. It should, and that can tell you therefore a parameter of whether you're healthy or not, or you've had a healthy day or not. Do you see this actually? This is such an important topic that actually this should be something which is mandatory almost for people to mandatory data for people to consume. And if they don't want to, then they can flick it off. But ultimately, it should be there as standard.
I hope so at some point, but I fully agree.
No, I wasn't expecting you to say no, but yeah.
No, I fully agree. It should become a commodity because, even if the data are not perfect, they're great to actually reflect your lifestyle, and really, and it's about context and content to guide consumers to a more sustainable level. And sometimes are the really small things that actually make a big difference, that you can directly apply to your life without actually changing that much. And I also think that it becomes commodity at some point. But I think what's very important about it is the underlying data of it needs to be open, because sustainability is ultimately a data game, right? So it hasn't been part of our economics or of a way of looking into businesses previously, because we basically never looked into it. How much do I produce on CO2 level, or how much land usage I have, or biodiversity I actually destroy by producing X, Y. So companies will now be forced, also regulatory wise, to do more reporting, et cetera, et cetera. Now the question is, what do we do? Do we stick to this old kind of paradigm saying, data is the new gold, so everyone is keeping it, and just everyone is kind of trying to build up some wall and saying, yeah, we are green too, but you can't really reflect on it. So I think the key is really to making sure that the underlying data is transparent, and that people can actually look more deeply into it, and can actually also have a view in it, saying is that actually accurate? Is this company really doing green stuff, or is it just really some greenwashing or whatever?
Yeah.
And that is a bit of a challenge, because a lot of the people or data companies still think data is the new gold, so we rather keep it. But in terms of sustainability, it has to be a commodity, it has to be a common good, and also the collaboration aspect is very, very important. To build transparent supply chains, to build also gaps in studies, right? There's a lot of studies out there which are still quoted, but they are sometimes 15 years old. They say, isn't there an update? But no one asks.
That's interesting. That's interesting. Patrick Collison yesterday tweeted about a company called Lower Carbon Capital, which is a VC that looks to back companies who, I mean, the marketing is quite aggressive, but want to slash CO2 emissions essentially. Do you think to really move the needle on this, because there's the B2C side in terms of customers understanding how much that they do, how much they they could potentially offset from their carbon footprint, what their carbon footprint is, and they can start making slight adjustments, which would obviously make a massive impact. From a financial services perspective, is this actually also as much trying to track the institutional money, where the institutional money is going, what companies are being backed, and sort of transparency of pension funds? I'm just trying to get a sense of there's such an enormity of problems, if you like, to solve in this space. But are they sort of on balance? Are they the same? Like, should we give those the same weight?
I think it does, or we have to. But the good thing is, I mean, you can certainly involve your consumers now, right? Because you have a common topic. So if you just ask them what is important for you, you could, for example, use the social development goal and saying, you know what, would you rather be focused on biodiversity or, I don't know, all of the other topics that are there, right? So you could basically ask consumers to be more engaged, and they're most likely will be more willing also to invest their own money, because they suddenly have the chance to actually have a voice that is recognized. And I think that's one of the other key aspects is in terms of sustainability. Consumers are now aware of it. And consumers want to change and they want to take action. And it's always like this, oh, politics has to do something, right? Okay, but politics is slow and it takes time and whatever. But there's this free market dynamic where consumers now starting to buy more environmentally friendly products or organic food and so on and so on. So it's a consumer choice. And obviously the market will react on it and will say, all right, if that's consumers now wanting, let's build up those products, let's invest in those, in that topic in generally. And I think that is a huge, I would say, opportunity for the market itself, but also for the financial industry to actually have this dialogue with the consumers, and they can know exactly what they want and they can adjust their investments accordingly. Because if I know consumers would like to have a carbon-free public transport, most likely carbon-free public transport companies will have an increase in the market share, right? So I can use the predictions or the needs from my customers in order to shape the market and can make money with it. So it would be, I rather would listen to my customers, because that's the market dynamic I want to reflect on the financial side as well.
Yeah, it is interesting. Over the last sort of 5 to 10 years, they say ESG companies that are regarded as ESG positive, if you like, have actually outperformed, and ESG funds have outperformed non-ESG funds. But then, of course, you get into that classification of what is an ESG, backed product. In which case, things like Tesla and that sort of normally, because again, their supply chains and whatever else are relatively transparent, they qualify for that. And obviously, the returns on some of those high-tech companies have been absolutely enormous. In the UK, through something called the Pension Schemes Bill, which we're not going to go into today, don't worry. But one of the interesting things of it is that it enforces, in fact, pension schemes to report on what the carbon footprint is of their investments, but also the changes. They've just been regulatory impacted to do this, is to report on the changes that they think the retirement pots would make onto the actual climate. So via your the investments that you've made in your pension pot, and it's probably all aggregated up, it means that you are impacting the temperature of the environment by X% or by X degrees. Yeah. Again, do you think that transparency will have will resonate with customers? And do you think customers, in the research that you've done prior to creating the product that you have, do you think customers will respond to that?
Yeah, they totally do. I mean, but it also depends a little bit on the customer target group. Let me phrase it like this, right? So one of the first banks that went live with our solution, that was a green neobank, and obviously it was their usual customer was young people engaged in it. They had a lot of interest and so on and so on. So obviously all of them said great, right? So that was a very easy win for us. But if you're speaking to let's say more the elder people or so, and where sustainability is not yet a key topic, they sometimes also say, all right, why the hell do I need to have these numbers now also in my account? I don't want this. I have other problems to deal with, et cetera, et cetera. But surprisingly, the entire topic becomes more broad in our society, and everyone is actually getting a bit of an interest at least. And this is a great way of again, building this level of transparency and engaging again with those customers.
I just wanted to talk a little bit about you guys, Ecolytiq. You've become a certified climate change partner in 2021. What does that mean exactly, and what benefits does that give you?
The benefit is you have a lot of work.
What is it? What is it actually? Is probably a good parameter just for people who don't know.
So it's a very interesting process. So what we basically did is we looked into what kind of environmental impact do we have with us as an organization, right? So it's like people commuting to work. Do we print stuff simply, or do we have a no printing policies until it's really necessary? How do people commute? If we have in our travel policy, for example, you don't, if you want to get a reimbursement on your expenses, you also have to add the CO2 level of your travel. So, right, you basically add all of your receipts, then you do a calculation and said, all right, this was X amount. So we actually can collect as an organization how much CO2 we are producing by just running our company. And then obviously we try to reduce it in some factors. Sometimes it's unavoidable, but some things are very easy, switching the electricity provider, or if people are in the home office, then you always obviously we help them also with their electricity bills or whatever is good, because they're saving on commuting, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of interesting aspects you can look into as an organization to see what is my individual impact. And making this just transparent is a very interesting process, because you need to change your travel policies and so on and so on.
And have you, I mean, an interesting question. Have you, well, I think it's interesting. Have you yourself felt the pressure because you've started the company that you have, but you haven't had a history, let's say, specifically in sustainability and ESG related work, in more payments work? Have you felt the pressure yourself to change your habits as a person in terms of, I don't know, recycling habits, the car you drive, etc., to fit, if you like, the company that you've created?
Yeah, I think this is just it comes automatically as soon as you start to look into the topic, right? And I even at some point I had to stop looking at some news or some latest updates, because it really looks bad out there, right? So if you do a deep dive into where we are and what will most likely happen with the world now, even on this level of temperature right now, it doesn't really look that good, right? And so of course you start changing your own habits. For me, it's small things, right? So meat has a tremendous impact. I mean, I'm not particularly a meat lover, but I did eat meat back then, and I still do sometimes. But in general, it's like, so okay, you have to change your diary. So you go shopping like you did the last, I don't know, 20 years, right? And it's like, let's do just 1 month of vegan food. And the first times you go into the show, it's like, I can't eat anything. Well, what the hell is vegan, right? I mean, I will die. And then after you actually had some practice and you looked into what is gone, you discovered so many new recipes. Like, how the hell did I survive until now without having that, right? And that's very surprising elements in it. But of course it takes time. And of course I still have a car, and because I need to have it, right? We're living outside a little bit of the city, so sometimes I have to commute. You start using it less. And sometimes, I don't know, it's cold outside and you have an early appointment, whatever. It's like, do I really go into the public transport now? Maybe not. No one's watching, so I take the car. Right? So you feel a bit guilty, and I think it's a good process. You don't need to be over it, and I think it takes time. And if my bank can help me, to easily act on it, I rather sometimes pay €5, plant some trees, but I use my car in the morning. It is a bit of cheating, yes. But it's a slow process, and over time you recognize, well, we rarely eat meat now or dairy products, and I rarely use my car, and so on and so on. So the change does not have to happen immediately. I don't think that will work. But if you start looking into it, it's a slow process, and it's actually a process that's quite enjoyable, because for me, using public transport now is a great thing. I started reading again and having more time for myself. This is amazing.
Yeah, I did want to ask you about Ecolytiq and where you are in your timeline, but there is a question that's come in. Vikram K, thanks for this. Do you have a template or a blueprint on how a company might start to voluntarily identify, measure, and report on their carbon footprint?
There are some great initiatives. So, for example, in Germany, it's something Leader for Climate Actions, and some others, and they have a kind of a blueprint or a guide-to book where they have a lot of interesting information collected on how you can implement this, what to watch after, etc., etc. So there must be something similar in the UK as well. I'm sorry, I don't know it right now on the top of my head, but there are few companies in that space, and I would start there because that's always very, very helpful.
Cool. And we've had another question as well from Ryan Pickett. Thanks for this one, Ryan. Will the data you collect be repurposed for anything besides CO2 impact?
Yes. Surprisingly, the answer is yes. But so what we do is we completely anonymize them, and some of those data are used for scientific actions, but only on certain programs where consumers are aware of it. So it's not like we have a hidden agenda where we basically use the data for whatever we want to do it. We really, on some of the customers that we're working with, we allow consumers to opt into a research program. Because if you look at some studies, they're still done heavily manually, right? So if you want to know the average UK household shopping list, they most likely ask 500 people to write it down, send in their receipts, and they have to do all of this stuff manually. But some of the fintechs obviously have really, really great solutions, right? You can basically opt into the program. We use the CO2 values, we use the transactions, and we can ask them, for example, to attach digital receipts, which allow them to build on a very large scale, actually getting more insights of it, which are being more precise overall. And that's kind of programs where we utilize those data as well, but only after an opt-in. So it's not like we have any hidden agenda in this. We're actually very transparent about this.
Cool. Thank you for that. Just in terms of, because we've only got a couple of minutes left, in terms of where you guys are in your timeline from a product perspective, do you want to sort of shed some light? Because I know it's still early doors in terms of early doors. That's an English phrase. An early stage in terms of where the company is right now. So it'd be great to know sort of, I guess, what 2021 has in store for you and how you're looking to grow.
Well, we have a working product. It's been tested now for over a year with some of our early customers. We have a lot of tier 1 and tier 2 banks in the pipeline, so it's more a 3-digit number already. So let's see if we get them all to sign the final contract. I mean, we were also very pleasant that we have been a part or are a part of the Visa Fintech Connect program. So that obviously helps a lot. I think as an outlook, one of the things that we also launched this year is the EU Open Sustainability Registry, which is basically a open platform to collect collaborative sustainability information that you can use, or that we use basically. So we make all of our information transparent there. So we publish all of that. We add new information. So things like merchants that are particularly acting or having a good sustainability agenda, they can reflect their work in there. That can be picked up from our algorithms again and made transparent to consumers. So there's a huge thing that we basically try to put together. Let's see how successful we become, because not everyone is happy of getting all of the data that we use publicly available, because it becomes a common good. And some companies making money of holding those data. So let's see.
And just to Vikram just adding another question, but this is an interesting one. Is this you're based in Germany normally? The company's run out of Germany. Is this going to the US? Can it go worldwide?
We use a country-specific model. So because you cannot really compare France to Germany, right? We Germans love coal, France love nuclear power. There's a difference of 3 tons, I think, on the energy level. So you can't really compare it. So we built the model country-specific. We are pretty good in Europe already in the coverage, and we will go to the US very soon. So actually, I think the first client launching in the US starts in April.
Cool, amazing. David, Thank you so much for joining. That was super interesting. I love the topic and I love what you guys are doing. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing some of your insights. Where is the best place to get hold of you, to speak to you, for anybody who's listening?
Either on LinkedIn or on our website, ecolytiq.com. Send a request. We're more than happy to pick it up. And also thank you very much for having me. It was really a pleasure. And let's do a deep dive at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we should. Absolutely. I could look forward to it. Right. Thanks. That's all we've got for this week. Don't miss our other live show, Newsroom, which goes live on Tuesdays at 3:30 GMT, 10:30 AM ET, where we take a deep dive into the biggest news stories of the week every single week. Have a great week, everyone. Thanks again, Davis, and goodbye.
Thank you.